Okay, so we're now moving over into Maya. So we've got the textures out of Photoshop, and what we're going to do is we're going to apply them to some facades. So again, I am not on Ritalin. This is on Fast Forward, and basically just to primarily to prevent me from having to talk for 16 hours. So all the snapping's on. So I'm just making sure that we have a basic facade piece, which is just a plane. You could just make a plane. I tend to always make a cube, don't know why, just force of habit. So I've just pressed D there to reset the pivot. You want to reset the pivots down to the corner of your facade pieces so that you can snap them together more easily. You'll see what I mean in a moment. So I'm just copying that a couple of times just so that we don't have to keep recreating a subdivided piece of geometry. So we've got a few subdivisions in there which will come in useful when we apply the texture. So I have just made a new material and applied that. So it just did that because I only had two faces selected. So it applied the UVs just to the two faces I had selected at the bottom. So I have now selected all the faces and applied the texture. So what I'm doing there is on the modelling tools. I have to talk fast as well when I'm doing this. So when I'm doing the on the modelling tools, I preserve UVs. I'm just putting in connect, which means that it subdivides between it subdivides the face, which is very useful when you need more geometry. I'm just doing that there, selecting those faces, pressing connect. It subdivides the geo. I'm just pulling that geo out to give us some depth. So what I did is that if you go over to your scale, I'm going to use my second mouse here. If you go over here and double click that, you'll give you a menu which you can click on preserve UVs, which will allow you to work on the geometry as you while keeping the textures. So if you move, if you end up moving vertices, so what I've done there is I've moved some vertices and I want to keep everything aligned on the grid. So basically what I'm doing is I'm just with grid snap turned on, I'm grabbing each vertex and then snapping it back onto the grid again so that we have a nice straight line so that everything snaps together in the Unreal grid space. So all I'm doing here is, like I said previously, I'm just cutting away some of the geo to match the shape of the roof. Okay, so I'm just using the multi-cut tool there, so I'm just cutting away that geo. In fact, I'm going to vertex snap it, or sorry, target weld it. It's hard work this, trying to talk this fast and watch the video at the same time, but I shall persevere. Okay, so that's so really I want this door to we're going to put some blast doors inside here that we are going to trigger to open in Unreal. So I've just extruded that back in. So you can see the process. It's really just a case of getting a piece of geo, applying your texture, and then what appears to be losing things. So again, I'm just checking the actual photograph of the full front of the geo of this magnificent building that I work in. And again, I'm just scaling that. So we've got that line lined up. So just snapping it with the vertex turned on and press V. And again, making sure the pivot's down the bottom left corner, which you want to be snapping all the geo together. So, I mean, you really want to kind of make sure that you're not overdoing it with geo, but just putting enough in to give the impression of it being a 3D object or a facade. So in this case, I mean, this is probably a bit more than you need to use for these pillars, but you know, with the capability of the computers we're using these days, and certainly with the power of Unreal, we are able to kind of make these pillars a little bit more rounded, which I think I'm going to do. So I'm just lining up the subdivisions with the windows. Okay. So I'm just going to pull those in or extrude those in. I think now would be the time to go and get a cup of tea if That's your thing. Okay, another one. So I think I'm making the chimneys, possibly. Yeah. So we need to just put the chimneys on the top of this piece of geometry. I've just noticed there that that is not actually a line. I should have actually snapped that onto the grid. So I pulled the vertex out of place there. I should have just snapped it back onto the grid. So let me just I'm just moving the pivot point so I can snap it up onto the top of this facade piece. I just rotated it, which is an old school technique for making something look cylindrical, when in fact it's a cube. So if you're looking at it at that angle, it looks partially cylindrical. And then I'm just really trying to match the shape of the chimney, which I've got the photograph open in the top window. Okay. So even though this is on super fast speed, this is still relatively tedious. Okay, got there in the end, maybe, I hope. Nope. Having some selection issues there. Did I give up? Okay, so just finding the just applying the texture again. So I'm just making so that's obviously applied the UVs in a particularly strange way. So what I'll do is I just tried it automatic. So I'm not entirely sure that's how I would normally leave it, but the thing is with this facade is that you are going to be at ground level looking up, and so as I've said, the textures don't need to be hugely detailed. So I'm building the actual brick chimney now, which is part of the Victorian construction of this magnificent edifice. It feels to me as if the chimneys are the bit that appears to be taking the longest. How I made my chimneys. Okay, so again I'm just twisting that, just matching the image. So this is just really a case of grabbing sections of it and adjusting. Okay, so it's telling me that I can't do some of the geometry adjustments unless I turn off the UV option. Okay. What I mean there is it wasn't letting me adjust the geometry. I had to turn off keep UVs applied before I could start adjusting geometry. It does it sometimes. So I'm having trouble here with the UVs here, so I'm just trying to select them face by face, and I'm just applying UVs face by face. So if you got the gist of this, I would suggest possibly moving on to the next video, because really all I'm doing from this point on is creating the other facades, and if I could get a cup of tea right now I would. Okay, so I'm just again moving the pivot, snapping those together, all looks good. Must be getting close, we're not getting close. Okay. Okay, so that all looks good. So we're just moving on to the next facade. Okay. Alright, so I think I want to leave this video at this point under the assumption that you are now aware of how I'm creating these facades, and then so next up we're going to take these into Unreal.